If your videos are not getting clicks, this is probably why. You either have a terrible title, a terrible thumbnail, or a terrible video, or all three, which is bad. But today we're gonna fix that. We're gonna talk about what makes a good thumbnail, what makes a good title, and then how to reinforce whatever that title and thumbnail combination say in your video to make sure that the audience doesn't feel like they're getting ripped off, but they're actually getting value and you're getting those clicks that you want and you're growing your channel. That's obviously the point. At the end, a special little bonus, what you should do in your video to re-solidify and make sure that whatever your video is about, whatever that title and thumbnail say, is reinforced in the video so the audience gets the value they came there for. That could be entertainment or education, it doesn't really matter. Let's hop in Photoshop, and if you don't have Photoshop, I'll show you how to do it in Canva too. Let's hop in there real quick and get to going on our thumbnail. All right, so a good thumbnail answers three things. It does three things. It has good composition, it's got good contrast, and it answers the problem or question at hand that the title poses. That said, for this video, I haven't done a title yet. I do that afterwards. And the reason I do that is because I generally know what my video is gonna be about. In this case, it's about titles and thumbnails and the videos themselves and how they all work together. So I know that I want my thumbnail to reflect that. I want it to somewhat allure or answer a question people might have about good titles and good thumbnails. So I'm gonna start here on Google. I'm gonna go to unsplash.com. That's where I start every single time I make a thumbnail, unless I have a very specific video that needs a photo, like I'm in it or something like that. I start here. The reason I start on Unsplash, which is a stock image website of like freelance photographers who put their stuff out there for free and you can just download it, is because I find that broadly appealing photos that may or may not have something to do with what I'm talking about, but grab attention, work best for me because I rely more on the text and the visual contrast in my thumbnail to grab attention first, and then use the title to solidify whatever text is on screen on that thumbnail. So I start here. You might have something more specific to your video that requires your thumbnail to be something you made, whether it's a photo you took or you're photoshopping something in. But in here, I start either in the street photography or the film section because of the style of my channel and what my viewers have come to expect. So let's go to film, and I'll just look for things that I think will help look good for my titles and thumbnails. Really, it's whatever I'm attracted to first. I see this photo, I like that contrast between the red and the white here, so I'm gonna click download. I'm gonna scroll through, I'm gonna find a bunch more. But now that we have our photos, I'll go ahead and I'll hop into Photoshop. If you don't use Photoshop and you don't have any money to do anything with like real softwares, you can always use Canva, that's free. And I do have a section in this video where I talk about really quickly how I can recreate whatever thumbnail I come up with here in Canva. So you can skip to that part of the video if you want to, but I would recommend sticking around to see the process. That being said, I'm gonna open Photoshop and drag these photos into my thumbnail document. Okay, so I'm gonna drag all them in, just like that. And as I do this, I start to see what photos I would use and what photos I wouldn't use, just right off the bat on how they make me feel when I resize them to fit the frame. Because again, that initial look that takes a quarter second on your audience's behalf is going to make or break the decision they make for choosing your video over someone else's. So if you're not feeling it right away, I cut it out.
I will send it back.
Now what do we do? Because I wanna make sure that the title is reflected in the thumbnail. Since I work in this way and I don't have a title yet, I know my thumbnail needs to be pretty general to attract an audience. The title can re-solidify and be maybe more specific, and then the video really gets into the nitty-gritty, of course. So in this regard, I know that my video being very on the nose, it's just how to make thumbnails and titles, good for your YouTube videos. I can keep this pretty simple, and I'm going to. I'm gonna press T, get my type tool out, and I'm gonna type in thumbnails and titles. Because again, that's what we're talking about. It attracts viewers to some regard because thumbnails and titles are keywords on YouTube, especially in this niche, and it gets to the point. It doesn't clutter up the screen, it doesn't make a mess of it where the viewers can't really identify what's happening when it's small and when it's blown up on a screen. So we wanna make sure that our composition and contrast are being addressed in the text, in the image, all of it. So thumbnails and titles. Obviously, that is not how the text will be. The text will be laid out in a nice way. So let's go ahead and figure out the composition we have of our text. That way it reads nice. It has some graphic design in the background. And I understand not all of us are graphic designers. However, we will get you going. So thumbnails, right? I want the word to be bigger, obviously, to take across the whole screen in some regard. I want the word and, because it's less important than the word thumbnails and the word titles. I want this to be like the, less obvious, but obviously needs to be there type of element. And then titles, I want it to be big too. And we'll keep it at this size for now. Now, all three of these need to be capitalized, at least for my style and preference of what I want out of this video. We're gonna change our font to whatever font we want. In my case, I go with Mikola. We're gonna take all three of these things, we're going to center them, and then I wanna change the tracking of the letters. Tracking is the distance between each letter, and I wanna make sure that the tracking lets this text end up to be the same width as the word thumbnails, so that way the composition feels nice. Go over here to tracking until we get a, generally speaking, pretty inline distance. Press V, drag this text up. Command G will group them, or Control G if you're on Windows. Press these three dots, align the selection to the canvas, and then recenter everything here so everything fits nice and neat. The problem is that there's not enough contrast between the text and the background. It's kind of hard to read, especially if it's small. It's kind of hard to know what that says. So, because this is a really good test, by the way, zooming out and just seeing if you can read it when it's tiny. Because of what this says here, I know that this background might not be the best choice, so let's turn it off and see if there's another one fits. That's a hell of a lot better. It's very clean. The contrast is pretty good without doing any other effects, and that really tells me that this might be a good option. So I'm gonna leave this one off, keep this offers temporarily. I don't like that one. The colors are too similar, and I don't like it enough that I'm gonna delete that one as an option. This one's really dark. I feel like it won't attract people to the right type of video because it will give it a grungier feeling, something I'm not trying to go for. So I'm gonna delete that. That's too messy, delete it. This one has potential if I blur the background, so maybe we'll keep it. This one could work, but there's a lot of stuff going on too. So we'll keep it as an idea, as a backup, but we'll start with this first one right here because I really like the color contrast between the blues and the yellow because that's my color that I use in my fonts. And I think overall, without doing anything else, this looks good, but we're going to do more stuff. In our group of text, which yours might not be a group, but I would suggest adding it to a group so you can apply the effects to it at once. Double click this to get your layer style options up. I do two things to the text, and you might already know what I do, but for the sake of it, we'll go over it. I add an outer glow and a drop shadow to my text. Now this thumbnail actually looks better without the drop shadow, but we'll keep it on for the sake of consistency between my other thumbnails, and we'll modify the outer glow and drop shadow to fit better. The outer glow color I choose is always the color of the text. That's my secret, at least. Click that. I come over here and highlight the actual color, which is FFD 935. That's the hex code. I'll increase the size a bit, increase the opacity to maybe to like 40-ish. Drop shadow, we'll click back on. I'll make sure 90 is on the angle, that way it goes below the text and not above it or behind it. We'll bring the opacity down to maybe like 20 something, size down to about 50, and then I'm gonna press OK. And this is kind of where I'm at right now. I kind of like this thumbnail, personally speaking. Will it be the best thumbnail? Generally, I make a few thumbnails and test them out, but nonetheless. And then on the photo itself, I want to go ahead and convert this to a smart object. That way I can add a smart filter to it. So go to filter, go to blur, Gaussian blur, maybe 1.5, 2 to it. Just a little bit more separation because again, we're going for contrast, we're going for composition, and of course, color. So I think that this is a pretty good thumbnail, at least for what I wanted to do. Go ahead, we'll just save this as a file, and then we'll move on. Okay, so now let's do the same thing in Canva so you get an idea of how to do it in a software that costs you nothing. Go to create a design, custom size. We'll type in 3840 by 2160, or down here you can see recently I did this because this is the second time I filmed this. Underneath uploads, let's go ahead and add our image. In this case, like I said, I already did this, so I added the image. You can go to upload files, choose your image and bring it in. I'm gonna click this, it will go into frame and center itself. Click that corner, hold Alt. Now I know that the background of this image was a little bit blurred and we changed the color a little bit in Photoshop. So under Edit Image, let's go to Blur, we'll go to Whole Image, and then we'll bring the intensity to about 5. It's good enough for me, maybe 7. Back, now we wanna go to Adjust. Let's change some of the values here. The whole image again, I want to change the vibrance, boost the vibrance up a little bit, bring the saturation up a tiny bit too. Let's make this a bit more yellow and green like we did in the last one. Maybe a little bit brighter as well. Good enough. Again, you just adjust things as you want to there, turn edit image off, and now we're done with this image. Let's go ahead and lock it so we don't mess with it anymore. And now I want to add text. So let's go to the text panel. We can add one of these automatic, font combinations that they choose for you, which could help if you're not a graphic designer or don't have that eye. In my case, I'm going to replicate what I did in Photoshop. So let's go click add a heading. We'll go ahead and type in thumbnails in all caps. Double click thumbnails. Let's go ahead and choose a font. Instead of CANVA Sans, I want to use something that's similar to Mikola. In my case, I went with Playfair Display and I went with semi-bold. That was pretty similar to Mikola because I don't have the option to import my own font here because I don't pay for the pro version of Canva. If you do, go ahead and drag in whatever font you want. Maybe that's the font you do want. So Thumbnails in Play for Display is good enough for me. I want to change this to about, I don't know, 250, maybe 350. I want to go ahead and type in a color code that I use. You can choose any color you want, or you can type in your own code. FFD935, that's the color that I use for all my thumbnails. That's the color yellow I use. Now we have the text looking pretty similar to what we did in Photoshop, so we'll make sure that it's centered, which it is. I'll go ahead, I'll click and drag this up to the top because of course I had thumbnails and titles. Now we'll go ahead, click off of it, click it once, Command D or Control D duplicates it. Let's click Shift and drag it down. Let's drag it down to about there. Click it twice, caps lock, titles, that way it's all caps. And we'll click from the left, we'll drag, and we'll do those first 5 letters again. And this time I want to go to spacing up here, and under letter spacing, I think the number I found out that works well for me is 680, maybe 600. Yeah, 600-ish is pretty decent. In fact, we might increase the font size to about 500 and go to about 500 as well, or maybe 400. We'll keep playing with it until it looks all right. So now, even though the word title is bigger than thumbnails, the spacing fits the same framing and the composition that we're going for here. Click all 3. Let's go to position. We want to make sure they're all centered, which they are, because that looks a whole lot nicer. Now, remember we locked that background, so we can't select it or do anything. So highlight all the text, which means it highlights only the text and doesn't do the background. Let's go ahead and group this. Go to position again. Make sure that it's centered and aligned to the page in the middle and the center. All of my text is selected at once, so I'll go to effects. I'll go to neon. I'll drop that down to 1, so I only get that glow around it. Duplicate it, position it again, centered and middle. Go back to effects, turn off style, and then we'll add a shadow slightly. Transparency, we'll make sure it's set to about 70. Offsets the distance, and then I'll change the color to black. And that's my thumbnail made in Canva. The left is Photoshop, the right is Canva. They're pretty similar. They're obviously not the same, but that's how you would do it in Canva. So now that we have our thumbnail, what can we do to test the thumbnail to make sure that the thumbnail and the title will work before we go and upload it for the video? Because I like to plan out the thumbnail and title before I make my video, so I know what that thumbnail and title is going to say to my audience, and then how I can make sure that the video reinforces that thumbnail and title. I have this website pulled up. It's called thumbsup.tv. I find it to be pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's a good option. We can go ahead and type in the title we want. So in this case, let's come up with a title. I think I'm gonna call this video, and I could be changing this for the future, how to create good titles. And then it can be like Trentorials 2024. Sure, I most likely will put more time into the title here and plan out something better, but for the sake of the tutorial, that's what I'm gonna go with. Now, if I wanna add a thumbnail, which I do, I'll click and drop a thumbnail into here. Right here, I have the thumbnail I made in Photoshop, and you'll see down here, you can see how the thumbnail and how the text and the YouTube UI will look on a home page, on a channel itself. Basically, every way you can see a video and its title and thumbnail, you'll see here on screen. This is my general process for creating the thumbnail, the actual process of creating it, why I choose what I choose, and how I go ahead and make sure that the thumbnail and title mesh well. And to keep my word on ending this video, talking about the video itself and how you can make sure that your video reinforces your title and your thumbnail, what do I do, or like what do I think on that? That's what I'm gonna share with you. I think that when you start your video, you need to, in the first 30 seconds, maybe a minute, but that's pushing it, especially with people's attention spans nowadays, you need to make sure that you answer either the question in the thumbnail or the question in the title, or whatever your audience might perceive that thumbnail title combination to be. You need to make sure that you are making sure that they know, hey, you came to the video expecting this. Now we're gonna talk about what you expect, and we're gonna make sure that you get what you expect, because that's how you retain an audience. Sure, you need to have a hook. You need to make sure that you're to the point and very clear and concise with your wording. Sure, you can add some personality, and maybe your thing is talking a lot. I do that. But at the end of the day, make sure that your video, when you start it, it answers the title or it answers the thumbnail, whatever question that might pose in the viewer's brain when they clicked on your title and thumbnail. This is my best advice for you guys. This is the best I can tell you, and I've been trying this for a long time now. This is getting long. We're gonna end the video here. I hope you guys have stuck around. If you have stuck around, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I hope this helped you guys. I'll see you soon.